Well, it's 3 o'clock. Thank you all for coming. Good afternoon. The budget workshop for the town of Carefree will come to order. Please take a silent roll call. And today we're going to have some of our town staff talk about what they're doing. So it's unusual to see you all from this perspective. Usually I see you working around your desks or somewhere. So that's great. And I just remind everyone, when you come up to the podium, please speak into the microphone so everyone at home or who wishes to review this later can hear you. All right. So item number one is workshop to discuss fiscal year 2023-24 budget. And Mr. Neese, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Mayor, members of council, staff, and residents. In preparation for the beginning of our new municipal fiscal year, which begins every July, every spring the town conducts its budget process. Today, as typical in this budget process, you will hear from town staff. In their respective presentations, as we've done in the past, staff will reflect upon the accomplishments this past year and touch upon their workload items, as well as budgetary items for future consideration. At the next budget workshop, we will take a deeper dive, more specifically focusing on the forecasted revenues and budgetary expenses. At a high level, these are the focus areas or topics that we will discuss today. As we typically do in these workshops, the workshop is designed to be conversational between the town staff and the town council. At the end of the workshop, members of the public in attendance may participate by completing a speaker form and handing it to our town clerk, and then the mayor will call upon the respective speakers. The budget process typically does not start today, but in late January. At that point, we're in the midpoint of the fiscal year, and staff starts evaluating the past and future workloads and trends, the upcoming initiatives, potential legislative initiatives, and or regulations that may impact the budget, as well as the progress of capital improvements, such as infrastructure maintenance projects. Later in the spring, the town begins to receive annual inflationary adjustments from the public safety contracts, regulatory adjustments, and updated agency fees. In addition, at this time, we start receiving the anticipated state share revenue forecast, and then we start collecting this information, and we start holding the public workshops to begin to define and refine the budget for the next fiscal year. In June, the bottom line expenditures are set, and finally in July, the budget hearing is held for consideration of the fiscal year budget for the next year. As indicated earlier, council and the community will hear from the department heads to review last year's results and the current needs and priorities for next fiscal year. Once again, this is meant to be conversational between staff and town council, so if there's questions, please feel free to interject and share your thoughts and ideas or questions. At the end of the discussion, public comment will be taken. Once again, we ask the speakers to complete a comment card and submit to Candace, the town clerk. This slide presentation is the organizational work plan. The bottom half of the slide is divided into 4 columns. These 4 columns are the 4 key tasks the organization has and continues to build upon: quality community infrastructure, quality community development, infrastructure management, economic development and financial sustainability, communication marketing, and community engagement. The town has a core municipal staff that is focused on developing, refining, and updating the plans to implement each one of these core tasks. Not to take away from the thunder of the respective town staff presentations, but at a very high level, these are some of the accomplishments over the past year. From a financial sustainability perspective, staff sought and has received or is in the process of receiving grant funding to offset the expense to manage the community's aging infrastructure. Once again, our infrastructure is not getting any younger, and as it ages, the costs go up. Therefore, seeking supplemental opportunities to help minimize the fiscal impact and spread the local dollars further are a critical element to our financial sustainability. From an infrastructure perspective over the past year, we invested about 25% of our streets in a street maintenance project. We invested in the infrastructure within the town center. We invested in pedestrian crosswalk safety improvements along Cave Creek Road. From a communication perspective, a mobile application was created, Carefree Connect. Hardware to better broadcast the town meetings was purchased, installed, and placed in use. And we conducted a comprehensive 2-year process to consider the options associated with fire emergency medical services. We started updating the town's general plan, updated our building codes, town regulations associated with short-term rentals, and updated the town center revitalization plan. These accomplishments would not be possible without our town staff. The town staff is supported by a total of 17 full-time positions. This is one of the smallest municipal staffs within the state, period. Each position brings a core competency to ensure compliance with state statutes and/or local municipal law. Each employee competency results from their education, continual training, professional certifications, personal or professional experience, and dedication to the community. In order to maintain and support this core staff and their respective families, salaries and benefits must be provided within the local market ranges for the benchmark communities, such as the town of Cave Creek. Now let's switch gears and hear from the respective town staff. Each manager or director position will introduce the staff members supporting their department or division and provide a general overview of their role, accomplishments this past year, and any items that may impact their respective part of the budget. To begin with, town administrative services. There are 2 full-time positions within the town administrative services. Myself, the town administrator, and the office manager, also our front desk clerk, Debbie Domenico. Town administration is the interface between the council and external organizations, governmental entities, citizens, businesses, and property owners, and the town staff. The role is to oversee the daily operations of the organization and execute the organizational work plan. In doing so, management administers contracted services and meets daily with various stakeholders. Through collaborative discussions, the administration documents issues, ideas, and concerns to the community and the council for consideration. An excellent example of this is the recent fire discussions that we had within the community. Good, bad, or indifferent on this topic, the topic was brought to light as a result of external changes that Carefree has no control over. A concerted 2-year effort was made to bring the community awareness around this issue, have community discussion, and ultimately have the community make a decision. Speaking of public safety, the town received grant funds to order a Type 6 brush truck and applied for additional grants for equipment for this truck. The chassis for the truck will be delivered this summer with the build and delivery forecast next spring. The town is also seeking grants to offset the cost of the fire truck. This may provide to be a heavy lift. The estimated cost of the fire truck today is about $1 million. The estimated delivery time once it's ordered is about 2 to 3 years. That delay is a result of the COVID shutdown and the supply chain issues that are being experienced throughout the nation. So it will take a significant amount of time to get that that fire truck delivered. We will continue on with the upgrades within the town center gardens, most notably the stucco repairs that will now occur on the west side of the gardens. And we will try and upgrade the audio equipment within the town center that is presenting some problems for us. So that's the administrative services section. Any questions associated with that?
Yes, so once we complete the stucco repairs, will we have done all the stucco repairs in the garden?
There is a additional phase that will cover the south side of the gardens. There's a couple walls there that will need repair. It also covers the bridge area too. So we're trying to provide a Rhino Shield protective surface to those areas so that painting lasts a lot longer too. We don't have to paint every 2 to 3 years.
And when they come back to do that, will they be able to address some of the, I think it's under warranty what they've done so far? I
Yes.
think. So they'll come back and they'll address those things?
Yes, yes, yes.
Any other questions?
Maintenance of the Veterans Memorial, is that our, the town's staff responsibility, or do we have volunteers that maintain that?
Yes, it is. It's the town staff responsibility, yes. All right, moving forward onto communication. Today, people receive information through multiple communication platforms. These platforms take on different formats to share community-related news. To manage these various platforms and maintain a centralized voice for the organization, the town's work plan focuses on improving the use of these communication engagement tools. This consistent approach to managing the use of the various communication platforms has resulted in significant increase in reach and effort to engage citizens and inform them about community topics, participation opportunities, and the decision-making process. These efforts this past year include the Carefree Connect newsletter, the update to the town's website, new broadcast equipment to live stream the town meetings, and new telephone application Carefree Connect. Looking towards the future, as you know, Erica Schumann, the town's communication manager, recently departed to take another opportunity with, which enabled her to work remotely. The town will be looking to fill this position to consistently manage and produce content to engage the citizens, the merchants, and other community interest. As the recent general plan communication survey indicates, people use different platforms to receive information. Therefore, continuing communication is important to engage residents in issues in the decision-making process. This is a critical element to what we do. It's one of the things that citizens said that they want better communication. We are investing in that. This position is an investment in that too. So we will look for another individual just as talented as what Erica brought to the table to continue that plan and continue that element of our work plan to engage the residents. Any question associated with the communication division? Okay. Moving on to the next part of administrative services, the town clerk's office, which oversees public records, local elections, the treasury, accounting functions, just to name a few. Candace will review some of the tasks and accomplishments, and then any budgetary requests for next year.
Thank you, Gary, and thank you, Mayor and Council. Thank you very much. As you're aware, I'm your town clerk. We don't have a deputy clerk. I handle all the records. I am the records clerk. Additionally, just to familiarize you, if you're not familiar with my background, besides having my master's in communication and court management, I am also a certified paralegal, so I do handle a lot of the day-to-day legal operations so that we don't have the expenses of the attorney. I am a certified municipal clerk, and I just finished all my qualifications for that master's, so I'll have a master's municipal clerk here by the end of the year. And additionally, I'm a certified court manager. So that gives me a little bit of background and assistance in helping you do your job. I do manage all the day-to-day operations for the council as far as scheduling and that type of thing involved with anything involving other entities and municipalities. And I won't reiterate what's already in the budget. I do want to tell you, however, that keep in mind that in addition to handling the operations and being the records clerk for our archival and day-to-day operations, we have increased our public records request now to 33 versus the 11 that was originally in the report. But I do want to thank, you're going to meet the planning clerk a little later, Samantha. Samantha did take over the day-to-day operations of the cemetery for me due to the high volume of work that I already had going on, and she has done an amazing job with that. So when you read that in the reports, we're going to update that to make sure that Samantha gets the credit that she deserves for the amazing work that she's done. Additionally, we don't have a deputy clerk, but there is a second person that is in our division, and that is Jim. Jim handles our accounting and most of our IT. He's going to come up and give you a brief overview of what he's done so far. And additionally, I have also been working with additional vendors to bring a more robust system to what we have here. We have increased our audio video here, but we're also going to work on, you will see a request from me for lavaliers. I've been working with vendors to create an even better and more robust video and audio service for the meetings so that they're clearer and easier to hear. So you'll see that come through as well. Thank you. Jim?
Accomplishments this last year, I've been putting in working on a new accounting system. And I'm gonna start running the new accounting system on July 1st, and I'll have to run the old accounting system in parallel for 3 to 6 months until I'm sure that everything is identical and, works correctly. So that kind of doubles the workload a little bit, so it'll be a little bit of a challenge, but I'm up for that. And also, we've been working with our insurance provider on, and the state, on the cybercrime problems that all of the state and local governments are doing. For instance, the city of Kingman had a ransomware attack, and it took them a couple of weeks to get their courts, their billing systems, everything unhostage taken and get back up and running. But we don't want anything like that here, and I've always kept an eye of the things, the virus things that are going around, and I alert our staff, you'll be getting these, disregard them, do not open them. And we're gonna be putting some training in place where people will get, our Nothing But Net is our services company, and they're helping me put some watching and different things in place for this new fiscal year that will further protect us, and it will help us to have our cybercrime insurance that we have through the pool, where they'll cover anything that happens. If I don't have all these things in place, then they won't cover us. So I'm working hard on that. As far as budgets and audits, that's the other thing that I work diligently on, to make sure we have accurate forecasts and accurate reports for the auditors, and anything they ask for. I'm always amazed at the things that they, different areas that they want the granular detail for. So I've got to know where that is, and I have to get it in a pretty fast fashion, because they keep moving, for what they've got to do. And also I do the human resources, like onboarding everybody in the RAGT, the Rural Arizona Group Health Trust, and also making sure that the payroll, all of that is done correctly, and HIPAA's followed, all of these different facets of making sure the human resources is done right. Most towns would have 3 people that do what I do. And in a couple of years here, when I retire, it may require more than 1 person. But right now, I'm still kicking it, so that's all good. But 21 years is a good distance of time, and I think I've done a good job, had good, clean audits over this time. So let's keep that up. Anybody have any questions?
Yeah, I do. I know how hard you work. I used to do that job. Just a question. You're gonna run the systems in parallel. Do you have to manually journal everything into both systems, or are you able to feed from the legacy system to the new system?
The new system doesn't have any,
No interface?
no interface to feed, so.
Okay. Are you satisfied with your antivirus software and your
We-
network
we're-
protection?
We're switching to a more robust one right now. And that's part of this insurance initiative. The insurance company gave us a list, and it said, you will do all these things, so we will not cover you. So I'm doing all of those things, and with Nothing But Net, and we will be more ironclad, and that's what we need to do. And all the cities and towns are having to do it, are the ones that are, involved with insurance from the pool. 90% of the companies that have cybercrime insurance, the insurance companies haven't paid on it, because they didn't do these 6 or 7, 8 steps of things.
Are they satisfied with your internal controls? That's
Yeah.
okay with
Oh,
that?
yes. Yeah.
Segregation of duties, et cetera?
Yeah, we're pretty small staff, so
No, I know, that's what I mean.
yeah. Could I have more people? It would be more expensive, but sure, that would be great. But everybody pitches in and help. If I need help, Debbie comes and helps, Samantha comes and helps. So, you know, when the crunch time hits, we kind of help each other. So
Thank you.
that works out very good.
Just a comment, if I may, I think it's, should be apparent to everybody that just with Jim and Candace, they wear multiple hats. I mean, listen, I do HR, I do IT, I do the accounting. I mean, thank you, but we have to all recognize it. We are a small town, but town with the people we have working for us, thank you. And appreciate all the hats you wear.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jim. I have a question for Candace, and it's related to public records requests. It's actually a two-part question. So, first question, about how long does a single request take to fulfill?
That's hard to answer because some of them it's a matter of when we have to get to them within a reasonable amount of time. So, and there's actually a three-pronged process. Once they're pulled, it's also added to a report because we have to keep that information. But it can be anything from an hour, if it's a simple, what is this form that you use, to several weeks, depending on the nature of the request, whether or not our town attorney has to be involved in the review and any of the answering of the information. So it's extremely varied. Right now, it's been taking quite a bit of my time. When I can get to it in addition to what else we're doing as far as the water company, where I'm also the secretary, and the UCFD, where I'm also the clerk. So I have information that I have to deal with them as well, so.
Okay, and that's a concern of mine because I know that those requests have been increasing the last few years, and I know it does take a lot of your time that needs to be spent doing other things. Is there anything in terms of repeated requests that we get that maybe can be placed on our town website so people can, it's more of a self-serve type of thing?
We're working on that. That's part of the agenda quick, so it'd be more similar, not as robust as what you see in the large cities, but there will be the availability for people to pull more information from the website themselves once our agenda quick goes live, which should be in the next couple of months.
Okay.
Samantha and I have trained with it. We've built all the templates. We've worked with the vendor, and we're getting ready to train all the staff so that they can do their part. Additionally, they also have another module that we can add to that. Unfortunately, it's too expensive for this budget, so you might see it in the next budget request.
Okay, so it's obviously something that we can publicize so that the residents that are making those requests can then do it themselves instead of tying
Yes,
up.
or
your-
they'll be directed on our website where our public information request form is at, what they can do for that
Okay,
information.
thank you.
Yeah.
So while it's, a information request can take just a few minutes or it can take hours. So do you track, say in this fiscal year, how many hours you may have spent? Do you have a feel for
I
that?
haven't had time.
Okay.
Somebody did track.
And another question, you're talking about the audio, and so will we replace these microphones? Is that, I mean, that
No,
would-
actually,
or
will
upgrade them or
increase.
something?
The plan, the most financially sound, least expensive way of getting a nice, robust system is to keep these microphones, because they do pick up. And then council would also have lavalier mics in addition to the attach-on mics, so that they're much better at picking up the individuals as they're speaking. And to actually replace all the audio system in the council chambers at this time is beyond our financial means, so. Yeah, that was our best solution with what we were given as options.
Thank you. Any other questions? Okay, well, thank you both.
All right, Mayor, members of council, moving on to, that was the Administrative Service Department. Moving on to Community Development, that is one of the pillars or core tasks that we focus upon. And let's focus right now on planning and zoning. So with that, I'll hand it off to Stacy.
Oh, great, thank you, Gary. Stacy Bridge-Denzak, I'm your Planning Director and Zoning Administrator. So right off the bat, you took my hats comment, but while I have those two roles along with our planning clerk who you met, Samantha Gazelle, while I don't know if I wear more hats than that or we wear more hats than that, but I can tell you we're definitely involved in many aspects of the organization, particularly as it pertains to growth and development, but we do find ourselves sort of weaving our way into some of the other departments and supporting them in their efforts. So based on zoning cases, let's kind of go through kind of what I do or what we do and what those roles are. So I would say with zoning cases, I act more as your planning director. And of note this year, we just recently approved the Carefree Distillery site plan, which is very exciting. We've got Carefree Distillery coming to Cave Creek Road and Scopa Trail. They're bringing sort of their operations and headquarters and just a really cool sort of format of a business, which should really bring in some good tourism and visitors to the town. We also, as Gary had mentioned, we began our general plan update process, and in my opinion, and I hope the audience opinion as well, I think it's been going very well. We've done some great survey work, we've had some good workshops. I think we have a top-rate consultant who's done this before, and I think he's there and he's able to answer the questions and listen to the feedback that we've been getting, and now we're getting into the part where we're actually going to start looking at the document. We also are just finalizing the signage component of the comprehensive sign and circulation plan. That's actually going to be coming to you in just in the next upcoming, the June town council meeting. We'll have our consultant there. We'll be bringing you forward the signage component of that plan. We are still working on the circulation side, which I'll get to, and I'm sure Steve might mention as well. So all of that has to do with then what I mentioned is zoning cases. So those are sort of things that we regulate and that Samantha is very involved in terms of creating agendas, putting packets together. I write reports. She does the minutes for the meetings, and she coordinates with the Planning and Zoning Commission. So I'm sort of, I work for the Planning and Zoning Development Review Board and Board of Adjustment group, which, as you know, are all the same people. But those were kind of main cases that I work on, but I do also everything from variances, mountainside cases, which are typically single-family development up on parts of the town that have steeper slopes. I look at other things such as design waivers and certain appeals. So those were just sort of a couple of quick major, I would call major projects in the town. But there's a lot of other things that go in front of the boards that represent the town. So I also work on our building permit side, and I would call that my zoning administrator hat. And Samantha is involved in that as well in terms of the process and getting the reviews squared away and answering zoning questions. But we look at doing reviews for building permits, everything from could be a simple solar installation to a complex mountainside case, like I mentioned, a home being built on the hill, a subdivision being built on the mountainsides, as well as new commercial buildings. We also perform inspections. Not as many as the building department may, but we're definitely there at the beginning to deal with the site and the landscape, and then we're there at the end to make sure that everybody's followed through with what the permit has, what they promise on the permit. I do work then closely with the building official itself. I mean, just things come up all the time during construction, even questions that we get through the permitting process. So we definitely work closely together, and I would say that, as I mentioned, probably what takes a lot of our time, and it's kind of the cool part of our jobs, is that we're there to field questions that are related to the zoning ordinance. I mean, we get questions from homeowners, home builders, people coming to town, people looking to locate a business in town, realtors, anything that's related to what somebody might want to build in town. We field those questions either they walk in, by email, by phone. And we try to be as responsive as we can. So when I said that we have our hands in other things, I do a lot of work with the codes in town, both your town code as well as the zoning ordinance. Just this past year, we did an update to our guest quarters in our zoning ordinance, which was important. It kind of goes a little bit, in a sense, hand in hand with the other important code update that we did this year was the short-term rental ordinance. And so tightening the guest quarters ordinance made it sort of fall in line with trying to really get as tough as we can with the short-term rentals, just shy of obviously prohibiting them, which we've talked about. So I was involved in creating that process, the forms, the web page, working with the code enforcement officer to get notifications out. And so Again, that's another aspect of the organization who I work closely with is code enforcement, because when anything comes up that's counter to your town code or to the zoning ordinance in particular, I have to get involved and write letters, and we kind of work together to try to figure out how to bring everybody into compliance. And so I was going to mention the cemetery, but Candace got that covered. I couldn't agree more. Samantha's taken the cemetery by the horns, and it is just beautiful now. She got it cleaned up. She's got all the records organized, the process is organized. She goes out and locates plots with the families. It's really streamlined, and it's an important little part of our town, so I think that's a really great accomplishment. But lastly, I would just mention that I do also work closely with economic development, and I'm sure Steve will talk a little bit more about some of the things that we've done together. But basically, I'm sort of there to help sort of facilitate some of his goals related to development and entitlements, and he'll talk about, I'm sure, why. Because eventually, those cases become zoning cases or cases that will eventually go to building permits. And so, and we also look together at some of these long-range plans. I mentioned the sign and circulation component. So like I said, we're kind of working together in terms of sort of bringing those plans forward and getting them concluded. As well as, for example, with the redevelopment plan, that was Steve's accomplishment, but it was accomplished again through the Planning and Zoning Department along with the Planning and Zoning Commission. So for our budget, we're really just looking for the fees to continue the general plan update. I would say in the next few years after that is really when we'll hopefully look for budget items related to updating our zoning ordinance, which is kind of an outcome hopefully from the general plan update, as well as thinking about things such as open space acquisition plans or master plans of that sort. So we do have some monies in there. We have our zoning ordinance published online, just as the town clerk does for the town code. So we kind of have a ongoing fee related to that for that publishing. But that's all I have. If you have any questions for me. That's all I have. I promise. Sorry.
Any questions from council?
Yes, if I may.
Yep.
States, a few years ago, as I recall, you started on digitizing documents, records, plats, et cetera. How far are we on that?
Councilmember Hatcher, not as far as I think we'd like to be, and that's a little bit of an overlap with the building department. And again, because we have kind of we kind of cross-pollinate a little bit, but for example, with the planning and zoning cases, we ask for those documents to be submitted to us electronically. So fortunately, we're kind of building that archive with those types of cases. I do believe the building department is well into the process. I know they've done a number of their archived files. I think it's just, it's a real time-consuming effort. I think Debbie steps in from time to time. I think there's the administrative people in the office that whenever they have a moment, they'll step in if they can help with that. So it's a big job. It's definitely a big job.
A means of protecting the records as well.
It's so important.
Fire and so forth.
It's absolutely, I mean, yes, as a planner, we're very much about keeping important documents and information. The town clerk is as well. We actually, and I know a couple of years back, Samantha, we consolidated at least the planning and zoning documents, and we have those safe over at StoreQuest. I think we share that with the town clerk as well, and got at least have them in a safe place. But you're exactly right. I mean, electronically is the best way to go. So we'll keep plugging away.
Good luck on that. I know
Yeah.
it's a big job.
It is a big job.
Okay, any other questions? All right, well, thank
Okay,
you,
great.
Stacy.
Thank you.
All right, moving on, second division under building safety is under community development is building safety. The building safety division issues building permits and conducts plan review and inspection services to ensure compliance with the building code. Over the past year, the building division conducted over 4,600 inspections, met with residents and property owners at sites over 2,300 times, conducted over 270 plan reviews, and permitted 32 new homes. Additionally, the building department, on top of that workload, brought up the 2018 I-codes. You might recall Joshua Ryson, one of the first things he did was bring to us the updated I-codes, and that aligns with the surrounding communities, so there's continuity between the respective communities. Some of you know that our building official of 24 years retired last year, and his replacement recently took another job with a prominent building company. So Brown and Associates, who helps to provide plan review and building inspection services, can help in the interim as we seek a quality building official to replace Joshua. This will, however, increase our contract, obviously, with Brown and Associates. So we do anticipate that from a budgetary perspective. In addition, we're looking at a new online permitting system. Right now, we're analog, everything's paper. And so we want to ensure that residents, if they're building something and they're out of town, if they're traveling, they can check up on their contractors, they can check up on inspections, regardless of where they are and regardless of time of day. And so we're looking at investing in that digitized system. There's a purchase into that system and then an ongoing subscription service. That's how they operate. So we're looking at that investment, and that, once again, will improve that level of service and help to digitize the department so that they can then also submit those digital prints as well too when we go through the plan review process. So those are some of the things that we're looking at in the building department for this next fiscal year. Any questions with building safety?
So on the permitting process, I mean, I think that's great. It'll make everyone's life much simpler, not only the contractor, but the front desk, because we have people coming in all the time. So will they be able to schedule inspections through that software?
Yes, the software has many abilities. One is also scheduling. There's a fee, a payment associated with that. So all that stuff, we still have to iron out how we're going to format this to fit the needs of Carefree. There's a menu of options, and so we've met with a number of vendors that provide this. That's one of the options that they do provide.
And say if someone's building a home, the homeowner could monitor it as well as the contractor.
Absolutely.
So if there's like finger pointing going on between the two or pointing at us, they can just go to it and see what the story is.
Correct,
Great.
correct. And you know, one of the things when you're going through plan review, there's 3 different divisions that review plans. There's the engineering division, there's planning and zoning, and then there's building safety. And each of them have their respective workloads and timelines associated with that plan review process. So this will help a resident to check on where it is within that stage. Also a contractor that's doing business in Carefree. So it makes us a lot more user-friendly, especially after hours, to have that interface with the town.
So just looking at building permits, so 32 new single-family residents were permitted, I suppose, in this year. So how many home construction building permits do we have going on at any given time?
That varies. Obviously, we have remodels that are going on. That's increasing, and the new homes are just one component of that. I don't know how many permits that we have going on at this respective time. I just don't have that number.
But what's also important for everyone to understand is that because contractors have a hard time hiring good qualified workers, during the building inspection, the onus or more work comes on us to make sure it's done right. And it requires probably multiple inspections for what 3 or 4 years ago might have taken one inspection and a couple of comments.
Absolutely.
So it's really changed.
Absolutely. You know, we spend a lot of time, I spend a lot of time working with folks articulating the building codes and the zoning codes because they're not familiar with that. And a lot of times they're frustrated and just want somebody to talk to better understand those requirements. So we'll still make ourselves approachable to deal with those issues. But from a building perspective, from an administrative perspective, from a zoning perspective, there is daily interface with residents and contractors and people looking to buy a house or operate a business. There's a tremendous amount of workload on a daily basis interfacing with members of the public on those respective issues.
So we provide the platform for them to check on stuff, right? Who pays for it?
Yeah, so we provide that platform. that's reimbursable through the building permit fees that they pay. So they pay a building permit fee, and they also pay a fee for plan review. So we have a cost recovery model that will be explained next week, some of the services that we provide as staff. We accumulate about $1.2 million in revenue to offset the salaries and benefits that we pay our employees. And that's because of the services that we provide.
Great.
Any other questions? Okay, well, thank you.
All right. Moving on to economic development. Obviously, we have a sales tax centric model. We just went through interesting time. The only time that property tax was on the ballot. And as I said on December 13th, nobody wanted to ask for a property tax. It's uncomfortable to ask for that, especially when I have always said that we have a sales tax centric model and we try and diversify and use what we got and do within our means. It's how we've operated since I've been here. So economic development is an important part of what we do. And Steve's going to talk about a little bit about what he's anticipating over this next fiscal year and some of the goals that he's focusing on.
Thanks, Gary, and I'm really glad you teed me up with the hottest topic in town. Great way to start the conversation. No, I'm just kidding. Mayor and Council, my name's Steve Prokopec, and I know you know me, but a lot of folks may not know who I am, and I'm the Economic Development Director for the town. I've been here for just a little over 3 years, and while I'm not sure about hats, I'm very embarrassed to say I'm a man of many shoes today. I literally put 2 different black shoes on today, and that is why you do not grab your shoes in a dark closet. And so, yeah, I just noticed that about 10 minutes ago. So economic development, and what's the role that I play into the town? And traditionally, when you're in economic development, you generally roll as a specialist. You're in business attraction, you're in redevelopment, you're in retail development, and in this case, I have to do all of those things. Looking at attraction and development, revitalization, commercial infill, and redevelopment as well for the town center. Also working on the marketing and advertising piece, the small business development advocacy. And then I'm also working on events and advertising and venue management. And that's something I never thought I would ever actually do, but nobody operates the Sanderson Lincoln Pavilion. And so I just took that over and run all the AV out of there as well. And then one of the things that's really popped up, and it kind of came out of 2 things. One is, as we look at the circulation piece, and we're putting in trailways and bike paths and contemplating those, a lot of people come up and talked about the need for additional community services, whether it's a dog park or, pickleball courts or, any kind of recreational activities. And so one of the things that we're starting to work on in conjunction with that trail program is looking at ways that we can enhance those kind of community services and really just talked with the gals that run the Zumba and the yoga and try to see if we can start building upon recreational amenities that are just beyond what they provide in there, but looking at putting together a recreational program and looking at ways that we can utilize whatever little pieces of land that we have around to at least fill in with potentially a trail system that allows us to have some of these amenities in the short run. And so that's something that I'll be looking at specifically. And I already sat down and talked with some folks at the state level about grants that are available for recreation and parks. And so there is a lot of money available for that. And really, what does economic development do? And at the end of the day, it's about creating a quality of life. And part of that is you got to pay your bills. So you got to find a way to pay for that. And my job is to try to find a way that how do we get another $2 to $2.5 million of recurring revenue coming into the town so we can help pay for not only the additional costs that we can anticipate for public safety and the things that we need, but also for the things that the community is starting to ask for. And as we go through this general plan update process, we'll get a really good idea and flavor of what those types of amenities are, whether it's like a park or some open space, because not only do those things cost money to construct or to build, but you have to operate those things as well. And so my primary role is to help facilitate that. And so at the end of the day, it's about a value proposition. And that value proposition is that we're increasing the value of what this town is to the residents, to the visitors, and to its businesses and property owners. So The accomplishments we had for this year was the completion of the Village Center redevelopment plan. And that took a lot of effort, and I really want to thank Stacy, and then actually Michael Baker International, Matt, who's running the general plan update, was fantastic on that, and helped us take that Village Center master plan into the redevelopment plan. And when we first started the program, a lot of things we talked about was building product and getting the infrastructure built so we can really have functional economic development into this town and start being able to really work with property owners and businesses. So this is a big component of that. Another component is the progression of the signage plan, and I think all we're looking for now is to get that through council, get approval on that, and then start the implementation. We were again working with Stacy, and then the circulation and parking plan. And so we've made huge strides in the circulation piece. It's taken, I mean, we've been able to receive a lot of input from various different neighborhoods, the businesses and property owners, as well as we had a stakeholder group. And Kimberly Horn's been helping us with that. And so we're at a point now where we're going to be sitting down and asking to have a workshop with council and the Planning Zoning Commission just to really kick off this final push on what we want at a conceptual level, and then take that through the summertime and the fall, have a lot of community input on that, and then hopefully by the end of this year we can have the circulation and that parking plan completed. So that's something that we're looking to do, and it's just been an ongoing large project. The other thing that accomplishments is a lot of it's just being able to put relationships together with building owners. And particularly we have three key relationships. That's the post office building, 100 Easy Street, Los Portales, and so we have a really relationship with the building owner there, and then the new owner over at Spanish Village. And so we're working on some key initiatives with all of those to really revitalize those buildings, and it's right now making small improvements. And particularly we're trying to find ways to increase parking over at Spanish Village. If there's ways we can do that behind the Shell station, that's something that we're going to be working on with them, as well as looking at the alleyways to be able to clean those alleyways up, put some of those dumpsters hidden where they're supposed to be behind enclosures, and just really improve the overall aesthetic of the town. And then the other part of it is accomplishments is we grew the events significantly this last year. You know, we kind of had to strip things down through COVID, but we've been able to really build those back up. I think we've made some progress with the Thunderbird event and really working with businesses and making it more palatable for the businesses in town. We moved the footprint around based on what businesses had been requesting to help out with more parking for the evening time for the restaurants. And so that's been a significant improvement, as well as now I can say that we've been doing this for the 2 years. Going into this third year of our events, we actually have a really robust schedule already put together. And so we're going to start looking at ways to fill that in as far as the events and activities that we have in town. And then the other thing is the Hampton opening. And I'm not saying I take credit all the way for that, but you know, it's a huge success for the town to have that going. You know, the revenue from that is pretty significant. And I know it's brought up some issues that people want to address as far as how we do revitalization in the town. And so one of the things that we're going to start looking at moving forward is, and it's part of what's in the Village Center Master Plan, is looking at our design standards, our design guidelines, and looking at zoning issues and zoning changes we can make that are going to be compatible with really what people see the vision is for the town center, and how we can make that functionally work. And so that's something that we're going to take into consideration, and if there's opportunities for us to be able to fix things that maybe need to be fixed, we're going to start working on those opportunities as well. For this next upcoming year, the other additional things we'll work on, obviously the two major corners that we have, the northeast corner, Cave Creek Road and Carefree Highway, we'll be working with Empire to try to obviously bring commercial development in there, and we know we have to do that right, because we really need to max. That's our single best opportunity to get as much revenue as we possibly can, because it really does fit into a regional area and a regional model, and it brings a lot of people and tax dollars that could come in just from the immediate area. And then we'll be working on the resort site, which is at Carefree Highway and Tom Darlington. There have been developers that are interested in that and going through due diligence, and so we'll continue to work with them to make sure it's consistent with what we promised the community. And then, obviously, I said, talking about the circulation plan and the signage plan. The other thing that we're going to be looking at is potentially going through an RFP process for the town hall site. We've talked about this before. You know, looking at the highest and best use for our site, where on the sundial, whether or not that's an office building, or if we can redevelop that site into something a little bit more productive. And if there's something we can do that's more productive for the town hall site, or to maybe even be in this area here, is something that we're considering and looking at other different locations. But the idea behind that is that it's a net zero proposition, that whatever we get there helps pay for whatever we want to build. And so at the end of the day, we can even come out of that with a recurring revenue stream from some type of development that can occur there. So whether I say it's net zero, it could be a net positive from a recurring revenue perspective. And then we're just going to continue to work with the property owners and businesses. One of the things, it's slow and go getting the businesses organized, but we're really, really getting close. And I think now that we're in the summertime, it's a little slower. A lot of the businesses say, hey, I got more time. And so we're really going to focus in on merchant groups on Easy Street and in the Spanish Village, really focused on the retail at this point. And with the artists, you know, the Third Thursday Art Walk has really taken off, and they're excited about it. One success story I want to talk about with that is when we look at advertising dollars, and the things, the way that we run the program is that we always look for private money to help leverage with public money, or we use public money to leverage private money. And we started out advertising that Third Thursday with, we paid the full freight for the advertising for that. And then slowly they kind of paid maybe like 10 to 15, 20%. Well, this last year they paid right around 50%. And so it's kind of nice to see that we can get them engaged and involved. And so our share goes down, their share goes up, and we get, you know, it's really nice, good private-public partnership. But as we look at some of the things we do, and the last thing I want to talk about is one of the budget requests that I have is looking at putting together revitalization programs. And it's probably the biggest ask I have. And the revitalization programs is really looking at the town center, and it's under that public-private partnership kind of concept that we can utilize public dollars to leverage private reinvestment into sites, whether it's infill development or it's really the revitalization of existing buildings to get them to a level that we'd like to see those at. And so that's where the design guidelines and all these things will start to come together as we start to put these programs together and drive us to a place where everybody feels good about how this town looks and feels, and the types of uses we have in the tenants. So with that, is there any questions?
I have a couple of questions. One, you were talking about some kind of trails and things like that. So I would just recommend, as we go through the general plan, that whatever ideas and visions you have are shared with Matt and everyone working on the general plan, so those ideas are incorporated or have a chance to be incorporated.
Sure, absolutely. And the one thing I do want to say is a lot of the things I'm going to be working on are going to involve a significant amount of public input, and so we're going to be really reaching out. In the summertime, it's nice because we can get the year-round residents, and you know, before it gets a little bit diluted with some people who are just here with, you know, for the winter time. But then we'll take that through the fall as well, so everybody can have an opportunity to participate.
And then another thing, we talk about economic development in the town core. I would suggest we take a look at EV charging stations and where they might be appropriate, and how to make that happen.
Absolutely, we'll definitely
Especially
do
with
that.
so much, I think there's a lot of federal dollars floating around that we may be able to tap into.
Absolutely, and I'll work with Stacy on that as well.
Steve, my
So-
question is, oh, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Paul.
My question was around promoting the downtown businesses, and I know that, and Gary, we had talked about this, that we have those banners that are on the light posts that you know, that are offered to business owners in our downtown core. Some advertising, you said, that is subsidized by the town to kind of help promote. The site at Los Portales, and I know there were some issues regarding ADA and it needing an elevator in there, but what type of activity do we have there? Is it we came close a couple of times with the theater group and some others that we're looking to relocate there. How is that going?
So Los Portales is a tough one. I mean, obviously, you know, you have a building owner who bought it for very little back in the 80s, and so, you know, the want to put money into something where you're already getting you know, a good return on your investment, even though it's not 100% full, makes it a little bit more difficult. You know, one of the things that we can look at and consider are there community opportunities that we can utilize, you know, as we look at maybe having some type of classes, or if we have some kind of recreational component, or if we have, is there an opportunity to maybe use Los Portales on the internal side for something like that? And then as we look at investment dollars, you know, part of what the revitalization programming can look like is not just for potentially the visual side of revitalization, but there's things that we can do that will help make the buildings more functional, especially those that are older, that maybe where the cost is prohibitive for redevelopment and the way that we'd like to see the redevelopment. And so those are things we'll just have to consider as we move forward.
So when you were talking about events and activities, what are you thinking of? Because we cut way back on that a few years ago.
Yeah,
All the street fairs and stuff, we cut back to the 3 Thunderbird events. Are you looking at adding more to that?
So, what do you mean as far as, so for the events that we have coming up for this season, a lot of it's gonna be community-based events, the things that we've been doing. So, we have our holiday events, and they're events that don't cost us really anything, and we do get a $4,000 APS grant typically every year. That helps fund for the Veterans Day. It does help fund our 2 holiday events, and then, we do some of that money for Earth Day, and Memorial Day. So those are the key ones we do have. We do have, the typical events that we have, like the Garden Seminar. DFT is already committed. The car show is already committed. We already have the 3 dates for the Thunderbirds committed. And then we're actually looking at putting a cultural event package together. And we're working with like some of the local businesses. For instance, Zuva Gallery is one of those where they're going to bring an artist in from Africa. And then we can do kind of he'll come in and talk about what he does, and he tours all around the world and gives speeches. And so it's going to be kind of interesting to have some of that. And so we're looking to build those types of events. And then if we can, it really comes down to utilizing that space for more basic type entertainment. We're not going to, it's not one of those things where you want to bring concerts in and you bring a bunch of people and all they do is come to a concert and then they leave, or we can't really support it's how do we really utilize that facility, I think, in a lot of cases to be for entertainment for our residents, if we're going to bring like that in. And then how do we then create an ambiance utilizing spaces and activities and events, whether it's a singer coming in, singer-songwriter, or working with businesses to put music on the street. Those are the kinds of things we're working at as events. The other side of that, I wasn't sure if you were talking about this, is we start to look at community services. There's a lot of, when you start looking at communities, you start building programs like art, painting programs. So we utilize some of our existing businesses who can provide, how to paint in watercolors and really start having that element and organize it in a way that it feels like it's part of what we'll call a town program. But it's really helps, and we work in concert with our private businesses.
Yeah, so years ago, I guess before COVID, we had talked about having artists throughout the gardens on the weekends who were actually working, and musicians spread out around so that we would actually get people circulating around the town. Is that still part of the plan?
That's still part of the plan. So on the third Thursday art walks, that is what we do. So if you come on a third Thursday, you're going to see the conservatory school that's out there. They have their strings out there they're playing. We had a business actually doing some kind of meditation yoga thing in the pavilion. It was kind of interesting. And then each of the businesses for that are actually we're stepping up the game, and they're going to be required now to provide something unique and individualistic. So it could be whether they're providing music or they're going to have an artist that's working in the doing some type of demonstration. And so each month it's a unique program. And then we're also talking with the local businesses, something called Carefree Cool Nights. And that would be something that we could do where we can expand on the evening times, especially when it starts getting warmer out, that where we actually provide, or they actually will provide the street level musicians, and then we'll work with them and how we can utilize the gardens. What we don't want is people hanging out at the gardens. It's nice to see them. We want them going to the businesses.
Right.
So that's some of the things but everything's going to be done, like I said, in concert with businesses. It has to be something that's going to benefit the businesses. And I think when they have skin in the game, they're more likely to participate and put effort into it.
Thanks.
Steve, I got a question for you. As many of us know, that pickleball is a very popular sport, and you mentioned earlier in your presentation, you would know physically where something could be built, but is there something we could do with the Holland Center? Do they have extra land there or any other facilities to work with them for that? Because I suspect there might be something very popular with our residents in Carefree.
For the Holland Center, or are you talking about Spirit in the Desert?
The Holland Center, I'm talking about.
Which is not Carefree.
I know, but
Yeah, I mean, we can talk-
coordinating with them if they had facilities or land, something we could do to provide, because I don't know where we would put
I mean,
a
they work with.
tennis court or a pickleball court here in town.
Yeah.
It
So,
doesn't seem like-
Councilmember Hatcher, they work with the Y a lot. The Y's right next door. Well, one of the things is there an opportunity to work with Spirit in the Desert? They bring people in. They do have land available, and so and particularly one of the areas I'd like to focus in on is right here on Nonchalant. right where you have the wash, in between the wash and nonchalant. Is there an opportunity maybe to work with them on, I haven't even talked to them about it yet, so here I'm talking about it in public.
So there
but-
are some areas here in town we could potentially develop
Yes, so,
something like that.
yep, so those are the things we're looking at. And, you know, you have the tennis courts that are unused across the street here. Is there a way that we can work over there to get those tennis courts repurposed into a pickleball court? You know, and that would be connected to a trail system eventually. And so the idea as we talk about recreation, you know, and I know there's a push for maybe doing a centralized park, but is there also an opportunity for us to be able to utilize a trail system that will allow people to have the access and connectivity, but along the way, there's recreational things that we can do at a smaller scale, whether it's just walking your dog or whether it's a pickleball court or, you know, the problem with pickleball is just the noise. And so that's one thing we'll have to be conscious of.
So Steve, can you give us some perspective on the zoning and design review changes for town center and just the process for that, maybe the timing for that, and whether or not there are items in the implementation plan for 0 to 2 years that are reliant on that?
So there are two different issues. The zoning, I think there's really only two major zoning issues that I can see that we need to address from a pure zoning perspective. One is as we looked at the mixed use desire for Easy Street, there's an on-site parking requirement. Well, most of the buildings that were built on Easy Street were built to a zero lot line standard, especially the older buildings that we would like to see potentially go to a mixed use. And so we've got to find ways to deal with that on-site parking requirement. And then the other thing is when we look at mixed use, is there an opportunity for us to be able to do mixed use projects that will allow for residential to be on ground floor? Because right now it generally requires residential to be on the second floor. And so as we went through that redevelopment process, we looked at potentially infill sites that could be residential that, you know, if we went commercial on those sites, it would actually detract potentially from the commercial that we currently have. So those are the zoning issues that we're looking at. And that can run a little bit differently than the design guidelines, because that can help impact some of the development that we want to see. But when we look at design guidelines, there's a couple ways to go about it. One is as we go through potentially an RFP or RFQ process, as we go through an RFP, RFQ process, we can actually maybe even look at what we want to do on our own site as being kind of the guidelines. But Stacy and I are really trying to figure that out as far as the best approach to looking at the design guidelines. In any respect, we're going to be starting that probably in the next 30 to 60 days with council and with the Planning Zoning Commission. And our goal is to actually probably try to have something done by the end of this year or first thing of the next year.
So then, are there implementation projects on the redevelopment plan that are reliant on these two items getting completed?
Currently, we still have existing guidelines, and so whatever would be going through today would go under those existing guidelines. So we're not going to hold anything up. But as we look at how we want to deal with the future, I mean, when we look at like whatever we would do on a town hall site, I think it'd be important that we have those guidelines in place, and that could help drive the discussion on those guidelines. That can go hand in hand.
Any other questions? Great, thanks, Steve.
Thank you.
All right, moving on to code enforcement. Obviously, when you have the built environment, there's a lot of finger pointing that goes on, neighbor upon neighbor, whether it's barking dogs or RVs. Our code enforcement officer, Dennis, will go through a little bit about what he does on a daily basis and anything looking towards the next fiscal year.
Thank you, Gary. Hello, Mayor and Vice Mayor, Council. I'm Dennis Randolph. I've been your code enforcement officer for the past 2.5 years. I come from pipeline operations, code enforcement with the state, federally trained through PHMSA for code interpretation and enforcement. With Carefree, I investigate complaints. We are a complaint-driven department. We average about 100, 120 complaints, but that also does not include the amount of follow-ups when I have to go back out and do further investigations. I'm also the court security officer and bailiff, so I work closely with our judge and court administrator. I process business licenses, vendor certifications. Now the short-term rental process. So I'm the interface between the town and the vendors and property owners. I also assist in the front office, so I handle some of the taking in of permits and any type of complaints that come across the desk. Accomplishments, as far as the vendor permits and business licenses, we've done probably about 500 to 600 business licenses and managed approximately 400 vendor permits through the Thunderbird events that we've had. Processing compliance issues, issuing new licenses, and I also maintain the estate sale process where people come in, they register their estate sale, and we provide them with signage so we don't get the cardboard boxes. I also, so I manage that process. As part of my past experience, I have been in emergency management. Gary tapped me to work with the Department of Emergency Management and FEMA to cobble together a emergency management plan. And I also used my vehicle and myself to make a buffer zone for public works when they're working in the road after storm damage, when they're doing windrow and shoulder mat work. So I'll provide a protective zone for those, so life safety events. And with that, I'm going to wrap it up and yield my time to Steve.
Before you,
an agreement, by the way.
okay. Hey, I have a question about short-term rentals. So we
Absolutely.
implemented this in February. So how has that impacted your workload?
Immensely. It's quite labor intensive because I send them out through registered mail. Once I get a bite, then I can follow up through email and phone calls. It's just we did have a change in documentation with the new ordinance, so it's a little bit more involved. Plus, to actually nail down the amount of active short-term rentals and long-term rentals, it's like trying to nail Jell-O to the wall. When we started out, we had identified 80 properties that were short-term and long-term. I was asked a question, how many do we have currently? I made the comment of 30. I looked again today, it's 40. So they come in and go on the online marketplace at their will.
But I also think by implementing the law, for those who are like hobbyists in the STR business said, I'm not going to do this. So it probably eliminated a lot of them.
Yeah, but there's also opportunists out there because when we did start, we had the golf tournament going on, we had Barrett Jackson, we had the Super Bowl, so there was a lot of people jumping in and out. So who knows what the reason is? They're not using their property. It's a perfect time to make a little extra money.
You're referring to the permit.
The licensing
Yeah.
for STRs.
Yeah, they also, we've chased some people down who were doing it on Facebook too. So it's not just VRBO. It's not just the big operators. So it's who do we have?
So the software that we purchased, that licensed software, does that help track them down when they're say,
Absolutely.
on Facebook?
No, not for Facebook. No, not the local newspapers or bulletin boards. So yeah, those are happenstance, and I depend on people who do use those platforms to say, hey, we've got something going on over here. So
When you find somebody that's doing this on Facebook to circumvent the VRBO fees and so forth, you just, once you have identified, you tell them, look, you have to get a permit, go through this
we have a document that Stacy made up, and it's you've been identified as an operator of a short or long-term rental property, and so that has been quite.
60 days to comply or something like that?
Yeah.
Okay.
So.
Any other questions? All right,
Good.
thank you.
Thanks, Dennis.
All right, Mayor, we're about halfway through the respective presentations from town staff. Moving on to Public Works. Obviously, as we all age, there's various ailments that we confront, and best maintenance practices help to offset those ailments. So exercise, eating well. Same thing with our infrastructure. It ages over time, different ailments. We got to manage that. So best maintenance practices. That's why you have a town engineer. Town engineer evaluates the infrastructure, programs that infrastructure, so that we have a capital improvement plan. Every community has it. And then there's fixed costs associated with that. And we have a savings that we take the excess funds from an operational budget and we put it into another bucket to help fund and offset the liability of that aging infrastructure. Once again, the costs of that do not go down over time, but as that infrastructure ages, it goes up. So it's important to have that savings plan to ensure that we have a solvent and sustainable way of managing this aging infrastructure. So Mark's an important part of that, as well as our facilities department. So Mark's going to go through what he does, as well as what the facility department does.
Thank you, Gary, Mayor, Councilman, residents. My name is Mark Millstone. I'm the town engineer. My department is one full-time and full-time equivalent, which is me. I actually just went through this week my 40th year as a licensed engineer, doing work not only in lots of areas in this country, but also outside this country. So it's been a very rewarding career. I guess I lost Steve, but I apologize in advance. I wanted to point out that my guy on the slide has two shoes that are the same. So, my biggest tasks or my role are that I manage the public works infrastructure and assets. So our infrastructure is our roadway system essentially, and it's the largest resource we have in town. So it's very important. I also coordinate the facilities department, Public Works, and I oversee the governmental compliance requirements. Some of my accomplishments this year, I updated the 5-year capital improvement program. I instituted that a year ago, and now it's time to update it for the following year. We also complied with all the continuing education requirements under governmental compliance, which includes dust control permit, as well as the MS4 program. It's a long story with the MS4 program. They've instituted a new general permit, and unfortunately it's going to cost the town a lot more, because it used to be visual inspections of our washes during storm flow. They've gone to analytical, whereby we need to take samples. Samples get shipped to a lab, which tests for some 150 chemicals. And as you can figure out, that's going to cost us quite a bit of money. So that's something we'll have to handle. What else did I do? In addition to the 30 planning applications that Stacy had, I also review them for grading and drainage issues, as well as flood control issues. And then on the building permit side, I've done at least 92 final inspections, again on the grading and drainage side. I've reviewed over 75 rights-of-way permits. I am also in charge of that program, so any utility or anybody that wants to come and dig up the road or be within our right-of-way needs to get a permit through me. And I'd like to give a kudo to Sam too, because she helps me with that program. Other items, I've updated the 10-year pavement maintenance program. So the big push this year was in the Highlands, and next year it's going to be surrounding Black Mountain. And we've got a good sized budget for that, unless Gary tells me otherwise. I attained some grant funding for crosswalks on Tom Darlington Drive. So the 3 crosswalks are Wampum Way, Ridgeview Place, as well as Cave Creek Road. So they're going to be upgrades for those. I also handled about 60 residential complaints or issues. So that'll be essentially drop-ins to town hall. They want to speak to the town engineer, and they have an issue that wants to be taken care of. I supervised the construction of improvements to Cave Creek Road. And I also reviewed and approved the payment invoices for our active contractors and/or engineering clients. So right now, I think we have 4 that are active. So at the end of each month, they'll send an invoice that I have to review and approve. Continuing on for this coming year, we have to continue our regulatory compliance. As we talked about, update the pavement maintenance project, design and construction of the drainage improvement. So we gained funding last year through flood control for a decent-sized drainage improvement on Carefree Drive. So that's being active and being designed as we currently speak. We hope to go to bid on that, hopefully in the late spring, early fall. And so there's going to be a little pain involved with closure on Carefree Drive for a little bit of time, but once the project's done, it's going to be a much safer condition. So I'm going to supervise and oversee the construction of the crosswalks on Tom Darlington Drive, as well as institute procedures and policies for traffic calming, which is very important. Safety is my #1 issue, and I just want to make sure that we continue to make things as safe as possible. That's it on the engineering side. I didn't know if you wanted me to go right to Public Works, or if there are any questions.
I have a question. Mark, is it roughly every 4 years that we institute the road resurfacing project?
That
Or
would,
section of the roads?
yeah, you mean going back, I'm sorry, Councilman Hatcher, going back to each road every 4 years?
No, just, I mean, all the miles we have in town are pretty small, but I know we don't do it all at one time, so we do it in sections. So every
Yes.
time we do a section, is it every 4 years we do a section of it, say 1/4 of our 8.5,
So no, we have a 10-year program.
10-year?
So we try to
Have it all
budget
done
our,
within 10 years?
yes.
And you break it up, how many, is it every 2 years we do a section of the road? Is it every 3 years? How do you do that?
Mayor, members of council, we rotate, so we actually cluster neighborhoods together to create an economy of scale, reduce the staging costs. One of the largest costs are staging for a project. So we cluster those respective projects, and we try and do them every year until the overall cycle is done. So right now, we're in phase 3 of the current cycle.
Oh, wow.
And based upon the performance of the street, obviously, as we sit here today, our streets are oxidizing, there's traffic over it, there's heavy equipment that goes over it on a daily basis. You're gonna get cracking over time. And it's based on weather events and the traffic that occurs over that street, and based on that, there's levels of distress. So we might have to go back more frequently based upon that level of distress. So one of the things Mark does is measure that distress and see how the streets are performing on an annual basis, and then we have to update it. So it's not a static plan, it's a dynamic plan that we have to regularly revisit to ensure that our streets are not falling apart. As soon as they start falling apart, we have to reconstruct the streets. To do all the streets in Carefree, if we were to do a 2-inch mill and then a new overlay, 2-inch overlay, you're looking at over $40 million. So it's a very expensive effort. That's why the best practice today is to ensure that you regularly maintain these streets. So that's what we do.
Thank you, Gary. And so what I've talked about last time we were here a year ago, every dollar not spent this year on doing pavement management will cost you $10 next year. So that's how easily the roadways deteriorate. So it's important to keep on an annual basis.
Are you talking $10 a square foot?
Well, no, I mean, that's just relative. It's 40 some odd bucks a square foot to do a mill and overlay.
$40?
Yeah,
I think it's $1 million a mile, $1.5 a mile, something like that.
that's a rough rule of thumb, but you can hold to that, yep.
A lot of money.
Okay, any other questions? Okay, thank you, Mark.
Okay, so I think I'll jump into Public Works. explore facilities. So I'd like to take a break. At this point, I supervise the staff in the Public Works, and I'm extremely pleased to be able to do that. They're a very good crew. But the one thing I wanted to point out today is, as of today, we have, or as of yesterday, we have a full complement of employees. So we hired, and I'm going to ask Bobby Marino to stand up. I hope everybody gets to meet him. He's our newest employee. This is his second day, and thank you for staying late on your second day, Bobby.
Welcome. Get used to it.
Yeah. I'm extremely happy with the work our Public Works guys do. So what do? They maintain all the facilities in town. As a matter of fact, Travis was out painting some gas equipment behind Town Hall this morning. So in addition to that, the other things they do is they install traffic and street signs. They do a lot of special events. In other words, for the 4th of July or Memorial Day, they'll set up chairs in the theater area and tables and stuff like that. And they manage to maintain the equipment. Mainly, their tasks consist of tree trimming, mowing. Monday is litter day, so they pick up litter every Monday. They maintain the gardens, so that could include electrical outlets that need to be repaired, fireplaces that need to be repaired, leaking irrigation equipment, anything to do with the gardens. Oh, every year they update and repaint the splash pad before it opens. So some of the accomplishments they've done this year, as we talked about, they thinned all the tree canopies within the gardens as well as in the arterial streets. The big thing that they did this year, because we have a new lift truck, is they put up and took down the holiday decorations. So that was a big plus, and that saved the town a lot of money by doing that. They repair all the street lights as well as electrical outlets, and now they're doing building lighting. The rope lighting on the top of the buildings was damaged due to construction, so they're out there making that whole again. We talked about they remove litter along the roadways. They install speed humps as a traffic calming method. The first ones we did was on Bloody Basin, and just today, I think you finished that, over on Rising Sun. So they accomplished innumerable amount of things, and like Travis says, he comes to work thinking he knows what he's going to do, but his day can easily change very quickly. They also help out with culvert inspections, as well as they do intensive storm cleanups. So during the monsoon season, they're out clearing the streets and getting the sand out of the wash, or out of the roadway that came from the washes. Big important project. Continuing on for this coming year, they're going to help me do the continued regulatory compliance and training. We need to refine our culvert inspection program. It's kind of been waylaid, so we need to come up with a plan on getting back into doing that. Now it's kind of like when we get a complaint, then we have to go out and see what's going. But we need to be a little bit more proactive on that respect. And then they continue to manage and maintain the rights of way of the town facilities and amenities. They're my eyes and ears for the pavement maintenance program. So as well as myself being out there and inspecting, they see things that I might not catch, and vice versa. So they're really helpful. And they also help me coordinate capital improvement projects. One that comes to mind equipment-wise is we have a kick broom, which essentially is a type of sweeper. It's more than 20 years old, and it's a big safety issue. The steering goes out on it all the time while it's being used, so you can understand how big an issue that is. And we have that in this year's coming capital improvement program to get that replaced. So we're excited to have that happen. That's all I have.
Any questions?
No, that's great.
Okay, well, great.
Thank you.
All right, moving on to the Consolidated Court. Many years ago, I negotiated a contract, an IGA, with the town of Cave Creek to consolidate our courts. The benefit to both communities is we share on the cost of staff. The court is located in the town of Cave Creek. We operate that court. Cave Creek reimburses us for that, the cost of operating. So in part, the staff salaries and benefits paid to the staff there, as well as the other contracts that we have for services, such as Judge Paracondola's contract and contracts for the public defender and the interpreter. So we do have a cost recovery model associated with the court. That also includes the fine structure as well too. So that is part of the cost recovery that we receive from the people who are being processed through the local court. That being said, the judge and the court administrator, Danielle, are here today to go through their respective budget requests.
Good afternoon, Town Council. My name is Danielle Stutz. I'm the court administrator for the Carefree Cave Creek Consolidated Court. I started as court administrator in December of 2022, so I know I am a new face to everybody in this room. I'm actually really glad that Steve mentioned pickleball, because since I started, I've gotten at least 4 or 5 phone calls asking where the pickleball court is, and I have to politely say, this is not the pickleball court, this is the municipal court. So now I know that I can just send them over to Steve, and that'll be so much easier for me. So just so you know, I was not plucked off of the street and placed as court administrator. I'm very familiar with the judicial branch. I actually started with the Superior Court in 2013. I worked there for quite some time before moving to the Court of Appeals, where I was for 5 years before coming here to Carefree. I love it here. The small community is great. I think going from a very large environment like the Superior Court and coming to a smaller court is ideal. I get a lot of face-to-face contact with everybody who walks through the door. It's a fantastic place to work. I've really enjoyed it so far. In this first year as court administrator, I'm really taking the time to evaluate where the court is in terms of accessibility and efficiency. Obviously, we need to keep in compliance with the administrative office of the courts or the Supreme Court. They really govern our operations, and we just want to remain in good standing with them and in good standing with the town. The ultimate goal of the court is to process civil and criminal citations issued in our jurisdiction. We respond to public issues regarding the judiciary. We answer many questions, not legal questions, because we don't like to give legal advice, but we do our best to make sure that our citizens know where to go and how to go about filing motions, whether it's with our court or with the Superior Court or any other court for that matter within the state and within the county. In the 6 months prior to my arrival, the court remained in compliance with AOC. It's met all of its responsibilities to both towns, Carefree and Cave Creek. The administrative office of the courts actually looks at our court as a model court, which is a great place to be. And in almost the 6 months that I've been with the court, we continue on that really great path. The slide displayed is not an exhaustive list of everything that we've done this past fiscal year. Just last week, I completed civil traffic officer hearing training, and it was really interesting to me because I was sitting at a table with other people from different jurisdictions, and one of those jurisdictions was Holbrook, and it's a very small place in Arizona, northern Arizona. Their population is about 4,000 plus. Carefree and Cave Creek combined, I don't know, upwards of 10,000. And the Holbrook Court actually employs 8 full-time employees for their 4,000 people. Our court employs 2 full-time employees, myself as court administrator and our deputy court clerk, Andy Mercer, who's absolutely fantastic. I have plenty of people coming into the court saying how helpful she is, how kind she is and generous with her time. Obviously, we also have Judge Paracondola. I've found that everybody loves Judge Paracondola. She's been nothing but fair and extremely, just an extremely neutral party when it comes to adjudicating cases. So So I think it's really interesting to take into account that we're a smaller court, but larger in terms of towns, and we're working with 2 full-time employees. I know we've talked about people wearing many hats. Andy wears many, many hats. She's a financial clerk, she's a warrants clerk, she's a disposition clerk. She's constantly on the phone with MCSO, or she wears many hats. I attribute a lot of the success of the court to Andy, and she certainly helped me and guided me to being a better court administrator, so I'm happy to have her with me. So in terms of accomplishments, like I said, it's not an exhaustive list, but I think the main ones that we need to think about are, you know, the law is constantly changing. The legislature is always coming out with something new. They're always throwing us a curveball. One of those things was there is a new procedure in terms of initial appearances for in-custody defendants, which is something we're going to have to address in this next fiscal year. And just making sure that in-custody defendants that come into Maricopa County Superior Court that are actually in the jurisdiction of our court and being sent to our court have the ability to have a public defender assigned to them in a timely manner. So that's something that we have to think about in terms of budgeting for public defender services in our next fiscal year. But as far as this fiscal year goes, we implemented significant revisions to our bond card. We've streamlined the court processes to improve customer service. I worked closely with Erica to update the town's website so that we can make more of our court forms accessible to people from home. So instead of having to call and say, how do I file this? They can just go online, read the instructions, fill out the form, and email it straight to us for a ruling. It just makes things move a lot smoother. Judge was asked by the Supreme Court actually to review and revise Chapter 13 of the Criminal Bench Book, which is incredible because that's utilized in statewide training. So I think that's a true testament to the Supreme Court's trust in Judge Periscindola. We've held our Security and Emergency Preparedness Committee meetings. We've looked at security protocols to make sure that we're keeping everybody safe. I've met with the head security officer from the City of Scottsdale Court to come in and kind of take a look and see where we can make some improvements. We've done a lot, and we are really moving forward in a direction where we just like to make things a little bit more accessible. You know, like I said previously, my first year here is to gain an understanding of where this court is as far as accessibility and efficiency. We always want to see our citizens face to face. I think that's very important, but we also have to keep in mind that, you know, Carefree is a common tourist place. We do have people who simply winter here. So it's important that those people that winter here, if they were to say get a traffic ticket and they are leaving in 2 weeks to go back to Michigan or New York, that we're not asking them to come back in order to have their case resolved. So that means making improvements to the way we conduct hearings. I'm not looking at that in the next fiscal year in terms of improving our audio and visual and kind of virtual hearing process, but it is something that I would like to see improved down the line. Something else, we just kind of have to keep upgrading and adding to our technology resources. When COVID came, I was at the Court of Appeals, and I thought for sure we were all gonna lose our jobs. I was like, how can we run a court where people have to come in and do oral arguments and no one's allowed to be face-to-face with each other? But we adjusted and we made those adjustments, and that's something that I think Carefree kind of has to catch up to a little bit, just in terms of those people that are out of state or can't access the court, physically access the court, even though they do live here. In addition to upgrading our technology resources, I'm hoping eventually we'll be able to start talking to developers about fashioning a minute entry system so that our records remain clear and concise. Right now, we do operate with a lot of paper, and I would like to go towards a more paperless approach. So that's going to involve talking to people about developing different systems to create an electronic minute entry system. an electronic way of filing documents instead of having them just emailed to us, just something that a person can file a motion online and it immediately gets docketed into our operating system. So those are things that are coming. Not necessarily this year. This year I really do want, this upcoming year I really do need to focus on what's coming down from the Supreme Court, including that new statute stating that in custody defendants at IA court need to have an immediate access to a public defender within the jurisdiction that their case is coming out of. I think that's it for me, unless you have any questions.
Any questions?
Just one.
Sure.
Sounds like you're pretty busy. With respect to scanning and putting things in a digital file for it, is it just a matter of equipment, or?
So we do currently, what we do is if we get a physical copy of something, we do scan it. But it's a lot it would be a lot easier if there was right now the county utilizes an e-filing system where you can just click on a link, upload a document, and it immediately goes into the case management system. Our case management system, Ajax, would allow for that if we had an e-filing system connected to it. So it's not a matter of equipment necessarily, because I have scanners that are actually provided by the Administrative Office of the Courts that I scan physical copies in, and then we just keep uploading and uploading. Andy spends a lot of time scanning and uploading and scanning and uploading. So it's just a matter of, rather than doing all of that, printing out the document and then having to scan it, just getting it straight from the person, putting an e-file stamp on it, and putting it into our operating system. I don't know if that answered your question.
Sounds like a software issue.
Yes, so that would be something, like I said, that we would like to reach out. I have several contacts over at the Court of Appeals in their IT department that prior to my leaving said, if you need anything, just give us a call. So people that I would probably confer with and figure out how to make that work.
I actually have a question. So we had opted in a couple of years ago into the Veterans Court program, in that the adjudication process and then disposition was handled a bit differently, and providing
Correct.
resources, mental health services, things like that. Have you been tracking how many cases we've seen and how that's been going?
It's interesting that you should say that, because they just held Veterans Court, and Judge Paris Gondola offered to, I think, oversee be at Veterans Court for the stand-down opportunity. Oh, different. Sorry. But yes, we've seen, I think, just recently we had one veteran that came in, but prior to all our proceedings, we make sure we ask, are you a veteran? And if they are, we offer them the Veterans Court services. We've just had one since I've been here in December.
And those are typically, they're nonviolent offenders. They're more or less, they traffic
Misdemeanor.
violations, things like that, misdemeanors, things.
Yeah.
Okay.
Misdemeanors.
Okay.
So,
Got
and the Veterans Court is out of Tempe. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, I would just say it's a real credit to the court that you're held up as a model, and the fact that it's a consolidated court, so it saves us money, saves Cave Creek money.
Sure.
You guys do a great job, so thank you.
Thanks.
All right, Mayor, members of council, that is the entire staff of Carefree. They're dedicated, they work hard at what they do, they're proud of what they do, and I couldn't be more happier to work with a group such as our staff. We do have some contractual services. They consist of two parts: risk management and obviously our public safety contracts. Under risk management, there's two subsets. General legal services, we contract out with Sherman and Howard. Town attorneys, they do many things. They look at contracts, they evaluate proposed ordinances and policies, look at legislative impacts and what it means at the local level, and interface with the League of Cities and Towns and the lobbyists that represents local communities. And then obviously in any community there's general legal disputes, and you need a town attorney to essentially deal with those respective issues. So they do many things, and the idea behind outside law firm is you get the expertise of a general law firm, and there's many specializations of the law, so you get the benefit of having access to the respective law firm and their specialist. Under insurance, we contract out with Southwest Risk. It's a municipal pool. We're not self-insured. We pool our resources with other small communities. There's 71 other small communities as part of Southwest Risk. During the League of Cities and Towns, they have their annual meeting and talk about their respective rates and stuff like that. But the beauty of operating in a municipal pool is when you deal with public sector issues, you deal with some very unique risk requirements, and there's costs associated with that. The idea behind the pool is to get the lowest possible cost associated with those unique requirements. So the Southwest Risk Insurance Pool has worked wonders to minimize our liability from a risk perspective. Under public safety, obviously two subcomponents there, law enforcement and then fire emergency medical services. Law enforcement has, MCSO, their contract, animal control, which is a separate division of the county, and our town prosecutor falls under law enforcement too. The law enforcement contract is going up by 17% this next year, or $85,000. It's a labor-centric contract similar to rural metro. We contract out for that labor, so the largest percentage of increase is associated with those labor costs. For fire emergency medical services, we have an existing 5-year contract with rural metro. We had a pause after 18 months to see if there would be a transition to automatic aid. Since we will not be transitioning to automatic aid, that relationship automatically renews for an additional 42 months to continue that overall 5-year term. That contract went up 20% last year, so it had a $300,000 impact on the town. That contract will go up during the remaining duration of that 5 years, 2.5% per year. That's a compounded rate, so it's a significant increase for us. So collectively, you look at the public safety contracts, that is one of the largest cost areas of our operational fund. So we'll go into that in a little bit more detail at next week's meeting, but significant increases with both law enforcement and then fire emergency medical services.
How much was the MCSO increase?
85,000. So there's two buckets, if you will. The first bucket that we were talking about was our operational budget. The next bucket we're talking about is capital projects. And that's our savings account. We have saved up to invest in our aging infrastructure. And there's many components to that. There's drainage components, and Mark talked about our culverts. We have over 300 drainage culverts that go underneath our roads throughout the community. We got to maintain those. There's costs associated with those. We have to clean them out. There's costs associated with that. We have pedestrian crosswalks, and as liability increases, we have to adjust and deal with some of these pedestrian crosswalks. Incrementally, we've been improving those, and so we're making additional investments in those. Our town center, this is kind of the centerpiece. This is the hub of the town. We have quite a bit of infrastructure out there between the street lights, the streets, the parking spaces, the gardens, the restrooms, everything that you see from a public perspective. Incrementally, we have to invest and update, and we do get vandalism. We have curbed that vandalism through the cameras that we have installed, but over time we do receive vandalism. We do see lights being stolen and other things happening, but it has significantly curbed that, but we still have to maintain those assets. So we have some funding going towards that, as well as a part of the revitalization effort, trying to deal with connectivity and dealing with handicapped access. So there's improvements that need to be made there. Mark referred to street maintenance projects. We have approximately $3 million for that next street maintenance project. This past year, approximately $2 million was spent. We're going to have a similar treatment for the roads that wrap around Black Mountain, which includes, it's called a cape seal. It includes a chip seal and then a slurry over top. So it's a double layered approach, which is a little bit more robust, and it helps to offset and mitigate the cracking that you see out there. So it's a more significant application. With those more significant applications, once again, as our roads age, we have to apply more costly applications to it. That is going to go up. So it sounds like a lot right now. It's going up. And once again, these are petroleum-based products. We see what we pay at the pump. It impacts these projects too. So it's important to have that savings account and then use that savings account to invest in these projects. And once again, we package them to create economy of scale and then incrementally invest. Water infrastructure is another component I'd like to touch upon. And before I get to that, the fire truck, we touched upon that a little bit earlier, about $1 million. We're looking at some grants for that. It's a heavy lift. Don't know if we will receive those grants. About a 2 to 3 year delivery time associated with that truck. I will be working with Rural Metro on the specifications to see how we could get a quick delivery of a truck. There might be a possibility there, but we'll have to work through that process with them. So we will be investing in a truck over this next fiscal year. Water infrastructure, once again, original Carefree system. We had in the past what's called a capital aid capital aid advance loan to the water company. And that's what helped to rebuild the original Carefree water system. A lot of Carefree was subdivided prior to the incorporation of the town. And the issue there is there aren't fire hydrants, or there were not fire hydrants through a lot of the original Carefree system. And so what we have done incrementally over time is the town has loaned the water company funds, and they paid it back incrementally to upgrade the water line. So you have to have physically a certain capacity within that water line to operate fire hydrants. Without that capacity, the fire hydrants are useless. So first, make sure you have the capacity in the water line, and then you can install those fire hydrants. Greg's going to go over some of those water infrastructure improvements that are associated with the capacity in those fire hydrants. So we're looking at overall about $7 million in capital projects, about 4.4 coming from our reserve fund. The rest of that is through those grants that we have applied for, and some of which we've already been granted. So that's how we try and position ourselves to offset this financial liability on an annual basis and extend those savings as much as possible that we have in our capital reserve fund. So that being said, let me turn it over to Greg, who will go into a little bit more detail about the water infrastructure.
Mayor Crane, members of the council, good afternoon. Greg Crossman, General Manager of the Water Company. My goal for this coming year is to be able to interject a little more humor into my presentation, like Mark, Steve, and Danielle. So I hear they will be offering seminars because my presentations tend to be a little bit dry. Hopefully they'll be able to spice mine up a little bit. Having water infrastructure on the town CIP is not something that you typically see. So Gary and I decided for this presentation we wanted to drill down a little bit more into that request so that you can understand what is behind that. Did you want me to control the screen, or do you want me to? I decided that you really can't understand our CIP request without understanding the big CIP picture, so I did want to go over with you. Probably the largest CIP project, capital improvement project, that's ever been undertaken within the town of Carefree, and that's the Carefree Water Consolidation Project, which is, I'm happy to report, we are approaching the end of that project. We are seeing light at the end of the tunnel, and as you can see from the scorecard that's up on the screen, we're making very, very good headway. About 93% of the 550 customers that we are expecting to transition over from the Cave Creek system to the Carefree Water system have been transitioned over. So about 510 customers have been transitioned over to date. Very, very great accomplishment. 96% of the meters that we want to replace have also been replaced, or 529 meters. And for all intents and purposes, 100% of the pipelines that we wanted to construct under the project have been constructed. That amounts to about 26,000 lineal feet of pipeline, or nearly 5 miles of pipeline have been put into the ground. Very, very great accomplishment. The other very major feature of the consolidation project is the Tom Darlington Water Storage Reservoir, which is about at 85% complete. Most of you have probably noticed that the wall around the utility area has been constructed. We have just recently, this week, pulled the construction fence back from the east to the west, and we are now starting on landscaping that far east side of the reservoir site, the part of the site that's adjacent to the Boulders residential community. So that's very exciting progress to get the site rejuvenated and back to natural desert landscaping that we've committed to and promised to do. We are still kind of grappling with supply chain issues as far as the electronic equipment and mechanical equipment that needs to be installed within the utility area, but those are starting to get under control, and very soon we'll have those things delivered. You'll see a little bit of activity out in the front, but soon we'll be able to be ready to commission the Tom Darlington Water Storage Reservoir. The final point on this slide is the Peaceful Place Booster Pump Station improvements. We have not contracted for and have not started those improvements, and that's something that we'll be talking about in this part of the presentation as I move forward. Let me make sure I can advance this. Perfect. Just to give you a status of the bonding for this project, as you remember, we did issue water revenue bonds, municipal water revenue bonds, to fund the Carefree Water Consolidation Project. The bond principal, or the amount we have to repay of the bonds, is just over $18.5 million. Also, as part of the proceeds that we got to fund the project, the bondholders paid a premium to obtain or to buy our bonds of about $3.3 million. So all said and done, the total proceeds that we got from our bonding effort was just under $22 million. To date, the balance in our bond fund is, as of April 30th, is just under $3.2 million. And we do expect that bond fund to be extinguished or exhausted by the time we get done with the construction that is currently ongoing and under contract. With that said, there are two important projects that remain unfunded for the water company that provide significant benefits to many of the Carefree Water customers in the original service area. And these two projects are shown on this slide. The Silver Saddle Gravity Zone Improvement Project and the Peaceful Place Booster Pump Station Improvement Project. And we'll talk a little bit more about these a little bit later in the presentation. This is the focus of the $2 million capital advance request that's in the town budget that Gary spoke of. So we are not breaking new ground, as Gary mentioned, as far as the capital advance. Capital advance was something that the town instituted originally after the UCFD acquired the water company in 1998. So essentially when the water company was a fledgling municipal company, the town extended some of its financial capability so that the water company could do capital improvement projects when it was not able to, with a pledge to the town to repay that amount of money. Originally, when that capital advance was done and was given to the water company, that amounted to about $3.2 million. The water company began repaying that amount in the latter part of 2018. And so to date, or actually by the end of June, we will have repaid to the town just over $2 million, with the remaining balance on that capital advance of about $1.1 million, or just a little bit over $1.1 million. We are now, in this town budget, asking for a new advance of $2 million, which would bring our new repayment amount to just under $3.2 million, again with a pledge to repay the town based on a repayment schedule that would need to be discussed and negotiated with Gary, Town Council, Board of Directors. We are currently making repayments on the capital advance. We will continue to be making repayments on the capital advance based on the $1.1 million that loan would be extinguished in 2028, I believe. So by adding this $2 million would essentially have to extend that repayment date to a date into the future. How will we use this $2 million of new capital advance? It will be for the two projects that we mentioned, the Silver Saddle Improvement Project and the Peaceful Place Booster Pump Station Improvement Project. $1.2 million of that capital advance would be used as a community match for the Silver Saddle project. We are lucky enough to have received a federal community grant to the tune of $800,000 thanks to the efforts of our Senate delegation, Mark Kelly and Kirsten Sinema. In this current year fiscal budget, we did receive that grant of $800,000. Now we get to learn how to get that money and all the hoops we have to jump through from the Fed's perspective to be able to get our $800,000. But the $1.2 million will be our match, our contribution to accomplish that project with a total budget of about $2 million. And then the remainder of that $2 million, $800,000, will be used for the Peaceful Place Booster Pump Station improvements. So let's go through the benefits and kind of the details of the first of the two projects, which would be the Silver Saddle Gravity Zone Improvement Project. This map does show you the location of this project. It is located up in the Highlands area. And the Highlands area Mark talked about, it's kind of the lower density area in the northern part of Carefree, very mountainous, very low density. It's notorious from our water perspective in having deficiently sized pipelines, deficient pipeline materials, and no fire hydrants in this area. This project would replace approximately 4,100 lineal feet of deficiently sized 3-inch line, very small water pipeline, with new 8-inch pipeline. That will give us the ability to install 7 new fire hydrants along this pipeline corridor, increasing exponentially the number of hydrants that are in the core of this Highlands area. This map kind of blows out to the big picture and gives you an idea of what the benefiting area is from this project, from the Silver Saddle Gravity Zone Improvement Project. You can see the red squiggly line coming from the 150,000 gallon tanks is the pipeline improvement alignment, along with being able to install fire hydrants along that squiggly line. This whole orange area benefits from the pipeline in that it allows us to more easily and readily get water from the 150,000 gallon tank sites, which are the highest point in our system, down to the lower parts of this zone. The benefiting area that is shown in orange represents about 544 properties that are currently in our original service area, and also represents about 47 properties that were transitioned over from Cave Creek as part of the Carefree acquisition or Carefree Water Consolidation Project. So you can see some very large benefits to our existing system from the Silver Saddle project. Now we'll discuss the Peaceful Place Booster Pump Station Improvement Project, second of the two that will be funded by this $2 million. This map shows you the alignment of pipeline improvements that we have installed under the Carefree Water Consolidation Project. This was a project that was identified under the consolidation project as needing to be done. It did require the improvement and replacement of 4-inch lines along Peaceful Place and along Nevermind Trail, about 3,200 feet, replacing that 4-inch line with new 6-inch line that does support fire hydrants, and the installation of 7 new hydrants. That part of the project is completed and is in place. Unfortunately, until we improve the booster pump station and add new pumping capacity, we can't feed those fire hydrants, so those fire hydrants are not in service. There is water going through the pipeline to serve the potable demand from the customers in that area, but we don't have enough pumping capacity to put enough flow to feed the hydrants. So each one of those fire hydrants has black bags over them to tell Rural Metro you cannot use this fire hydrant. With the improvements to the Peaceful Place booster pump station, we will be able to transition over the last of the consolidation project customers, about 21 new customers in the west side of Neighborhood B that need these booster pump station improvements to replace their fire protection that they currently have. And then it will also bring new fire protection to 21 current properties in our original water service area that would be served by that pipeline and new fire hydrants that we just talked about. In addition to that, and this is the neighborhood to the south of Peaceful Place booster pump station. You can see it's now the north side of this graphic at the blue dot. There is a neighborhood to the south of the booster pump station that's currently served by the booster pump station. We will be able to provide future fire protection in this area when we improve the pipelines in this area. Currently, this whole area is served by 4-inch pipelines. It would need to be upgraded to 6-inch pipelines, but that would bring about 31 or fire protection to 31 more properties in our original service area as we do those improvements in the future. So in summary, from a fire protection perspective, the improvements to the Peaceful Place booster pump station would provide fire protection services to, or potential fire protection services to 52 properties in our original service area and 21 properties in the transition area. So with that, I'd like to open it up to any, I guess this is Gary's last slide, open up to any questions that you might have.
So one question, the capital advance loans, historically, the town has given loans to the water company and the water company's paid them back. Is there any interest associated with those?
Mayor, no, these have been very advantageous for the water company. We do thank the town for this. They've been loans at 0% interest. So the town has extended these loans to the water company and has just expected those to be paid back dollar for dollar.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions?
So the future fire protection zone is not yet funded?
That is correct. This future fire protection zone and the pipeline improvements needed have not been funded.
So those 7 fire hydrants that you're going to install in the area for those 21 customers, if they were to have a major event today, fire, can we get water to fight those fires?
Those fire hydrants are in place, and they really aren't, the pumping capability of the booster pump station is not adequate to support those fire hydrants. Water will come out of those fire hydrants in a pinch. I would imagine Rural Metro may be out there going, how much water can we get out of these? We just do not want to give the impression that these are fire hydrants that are capable of fire protection.
So it's pretty tenuous.
It's tenuous.
Okay.
Yeah, they're very small pumps that are at the booster pump station right now not anything that would be close to the fire, the flow needed to fight a fire. More like the flow that would come out of a garden hose.
When do you expect to have these two areas, fire hydrants and so forth? 2 years?
Actually, you know, we've got Aiken Gardner. The good thing is we've got Aiken Gardner, we've got our construction manager at risk in the area mobilized. That's one big reason why we've requested this money from the town, so that we can utilize the fact that we have a very capable contractor who's here, who we can contract with to very quickly move on these and get these completed. Definitely, we do have some design things that we need to work out with the Peaceful Place Booster Pump Station. We do have some governmental funding issues that we have to work out on the Silver Saddle job, but I would imagine by the end of the year, by early next year, we would want to have these in place.
I'm surprised that they were able to build those homes when there's no access to water outside of a fire truck coming that has the water on the truck itself.
Which homes are you speaking
Any
of?
of them, you know, that there's no fire hydrants and
Yeah.
you're kind of sitting out there.
It's not unusual, and especially in rural areas like this, there's no requirement to have firefighting capability right adjacent to your home. It does help you on your insurance, and that's one reason why we have been, and we've instituted a program that Gary talked about, of increasing fire protection within the community, bringing these services to more and more carefree neighborhoods. Because it is something that, as we become more part of the urban core of the Phoenix area, it is something that's expected. But as we developed in part of the more rural areas, not fighting capability isn't always necessarily in place in some of these areas. And so we're kind of playing catch up here in Carefree.
Once that's done, though, you'll notify those residents to bring them aware about the potential reduction in their insurance cost?
Absolutely, and typically on your home insurance, they ask you, what is the closest fire hydrant? If, you know, now they can say it's 100 feet away, as opposed to, well, it's miles away.
And just to add to that discussion real briefly, if those lots, if this area was developed under today's subdivision ordinance, it would require them to install fire hydrants every 550 feet. That was updated when I came on board 20 plus years ago to incorporate that standard within the subdivision ordinance. That didn't exist. So we do have that requirement today. So any areas that are subdivided are required to have those fire hydrants.
Thank you.
Thank you, Gary.
Okay, any other questions? Good job, good
I
explanation.
just one, Greg, in front of the tank, the buried tank, I recall weren't we going to build a berm in front of that, even in front of the wall itself? Was it a dirt mound to be built, a deck, you know, with landscaping and so forth, or
Yeah, Councilmember Hatcher, no, there was no, you know, all the berming was on the east side, on the back. What we did commit to in the front is there's a horseshoe driveway, and within the middle of that horseshoe driveway is an area that we can landscape. So we do plan on heavy landscaping in that middle horseshoe area and all around the area that we'll be working right now. So that's something you're not going to see immediately, because that's an area that we've kind of compressed and condensed the work into. You won't be landscaping on the east side, but as soon as we're done with what we need to get done in the utility area, we're going to then put an effort into re-landscaping the front, which will screen it from view from Tom Darlington also. So we're trying to do a really good job of hiding our water storage reservoir.
thank you.
Okay, thank you, Greg.
Thank you.
All right, thanks, Greg. All right, last slide. So that concludes our conversation today. Our next budget workshop will be a week from today on May 25th, at which time the forecasted revenue and planned expenses would be reviewed. Our tentative budget will be reviewed, which sets the bottom line. The bottom line is our overall expenditure limit for that given year. We cannot exceed that limit once that is adopted, but money can be moved around the budget according to the respective laws that govern our municipal budget. The budget adoption, our public hearing will be held on July 11th, July 4th. Obviously, nobody will be here. They'll be enjoying the holiday, so it will be a week later this year, so a budget adoption on July 11th. That concludes our presentation. Be glad to address any questions, and if there aren't any additional questions, we can also go to public comment.
So I just have one comment, or one comment to the staff for being, when you were here for 2 hours, that's great. But now if you sit back and listen to their credentials and their experience and what they've accomplished, it's really quite impressive. We get to run an entire town with just a handful of people. So thank you for all you do. And I would suggest, even to the council, sitting here paying attention for 2 hours is kind of arduous. Let's go back and listen to the,
Where's the coffee jar? I mean, come on.
yeah, go back and listen, watch the video, because it's a real education to hear what they do.
A lot of hats.
Yeah, a lot of hats. So thank you very much.
Yeah.
Okay, now we go to call to the,
Call to public,
what do we call it?
yes.
Call to the public, public comment. So I would just remind everyone who wishes to participate, you have to fill out a form. You come up to the dais and or the podium, and you state your name and address. You're limited to 3 minutes, and we'll do it. So we have one slip for Mr. John Mattis.
Good afternoon. John Mattis, Carefree, and Graythorn Circles. I've attended a number of different sessions, whether it be the public safety, whether it be town council meetings. The thing I've never heard, especially with
Could you
Mr.
speak into
Rounds-
the microphone, please?
Mr. Rounds' presentation was income. What do we generate sales tax? Where do we get the monies? How much monies were we going to be needing if we went to auto aid? The thing I've never heard is, where are the budget savings? Got to be budget savings. I mean, I know my personal finances, if it gets to a point where something increases, I've got to decrease something else if you don't have the income coming in. So you have a budget savings. In 1984, the town was incorporated. It's a sunshine government, it says. 36 years, there were 4 positions that were generated to full-time positions from part-time positions within the last 3.5, 4 years ago. There was no study that was done for work study. I've asked that question a couple of times, and Mr. Mayor, I finally got an answer from you. So we have 4 positions that were elevated from part-time contract positions that was working apparently fine for 36 years. We haven't incorporated any areas, so we don't have any new roads. So possibly you could look at reducing those full-time positions to part-time positions. I think the residents sent a resounding message, I hope, on the ballot measure. And the general plan responses were pretty resounding also. What do we want? We want open space. We want a government that is responsive to the residents. I hope that will be what's brought out and it's been taken from the votes and also the general plan. As far as public records, it's an easy way to do it. I did it. I did it for 25 years. Responded as a custodian of record for 2 separate agencies. It's very easy to do. 7 years ago, we digitized a number of things that were constantly asked. I believe you brought that up on how do we do it. Put it on the website. It's easy. A lot of information that's asked for could be very easily put on the website. Thank you.
I would just suggest if you have other ideas, 'cause it sounds like you have a couple other things, just let Candace know what they are, send her a note or something, or a phone call.
Be happy to. Thank you.
All right, any other comments from council?
Yeah, just one comment. I was keeping score as we were going through the departments. And it would be interesting to look at it. We've got about 15 people or so, from what I counted off the presentation, including Gary. It seems as though the town has grown and the workloads have not gotten less. You have one building inspector, for example. That's a lot of work. So maybe we could do some analysis, but I suspect in commenting on what I just heard is we're gonna find that we're working pretty lean. I had 200 people working for me all around the world at one time, and I understand what it's like to have head count and have too many people. And the worst thing you ever went through was head count reduction discussions. So we should take it very seriously. I think Mr. Mattis's comments are apropos. And see what the workload looks like and how we match up with the employees. 4 guys to walk around and pick up trash and maintain the whole town doesn't seem to me intuitively like a lot of people.
Yeah.
But anyway, the question's legitimate. I think we should look at it.
Yeah, absolutely, yep, I agree. And in fact, there's some things increase over time. So our population increases, the trash increases, but say like at the MS4, if that's what it's called, so we get these unfunded mandates which put a burden upon the town, and maybe there's other things that I don't appreciate, but you're, Councilman, you're correct. Take a look, we should take a look at it. Any other comments? Okay, that will adjourn the workshop, and we'll do it again on Thursday, next week. The art walk is tonight, so you can go out and check out a studio.
Thank you.
Thank you.